Ukraine is not Russia's only target. It's clear that the Kremlin has its sights set on several other nations across Central and Eastern Europe, and Poland may very well be its top priority. Warsaw has been readying its defences for just such an occasion for quite some time, modernising its military and increasing investment in its national security. But is Poland truly ready for a Russian invasion? Will the Kremlin's war machine roll all the way to Warsaw without a scratch, or would it come unstuck all over again, just as it has in Ukraine? So here's a closer look at how a hypothetical war between Russia and Poland in 2026 may play out. Of course, it's impossible to predict with any degree of certainty or precision how a military conflict could unravel. There are so many factors and variables at play, and near endless possibilities to explore and imagine. But we can look at the data and statistics available to make some educated assumptions about both sides' chances of victory. And if we focus purely and simply on core military metrics, like available manpower or quantities of tanks, bombers, fighter jets and missile systems, it doesn't look great for Poland's prospects. According to the latest available data from Global Firepower, one of the world's leading sources of military data and analysis, which produces annual rankings of 145 modern military powers around the world, Russia has the joint second strongest armed forces on the planet, behind the United States in top spot and tied with China. Poland, meanwhile, fails to break the top 20, sitting in the 21st position, just ahead of Taiwan and Vietnam, but behind Ukraine, Egypt and Australia. Digging deeper into the data, given that Russia is a much larger country than Poland, with a greater population, bigger stockpiles of military equipment, and an enormous military budget, it's unsurprising that the Kremlin comes out on top in most major metrics. In terms of manpower, for example, Russia may have suffered more than 1 million casualties in its war with Ukraine, but it still has an estimated 1.3 million active duty personnel, with 2 million more reservists ready to enter the fray, should they be needed. Russia also has more than 1 million more people reaching military age each year, along with a total population of more than 140 million people, with over 46 million deemed fit for active service. Poland, meanwhile, has a significantly smaller force of just over 200,000 people at the latest count, with a further 350,000 in reserve. Close to 500,000 Polish people reach military age each year, and the country's total population sits at over 38 million, with more than 15 million fit for service. However, Poland is taking steps to expand its active duty numbers. Early in 2025, the country's Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, announced a plan to make all Polish men undergo military training, as well as any women that wanted to play their part. He also unveiled a goal to grow the country's army to 500,000 active duty personnel, including reservists, and with millions more Polish men set to undergo military training, Poland would have countless more potential soldiers to call on should an invasion ever occur. It's still not enough to match Russia, man for man, but Poland is clearly doing what it can to build a force of significant size and strength. Soldiers are the lifeblood of any army, but a strong military force also requires large numbers of powerful advanced equipment, weapons and vehicles. On the ground, at least as far as statistics are concerned, Russia has historically had one of the strongest armies in the world. While it suffered enormous losses of tanks, armored vehicles and other assets in Ukraine, it continues to boast of a force that dwarfs many other armies in the world. Russia has thousands more tanks than Poland, for example, and tens of thousands more armored vehicles. It also boasts dramatically greater numbers of self-propelled and towed artillery systems, with which it can bombard its enemies from a distance, and thousands of mobile rocket projectors, while Poland has just under 200. In the air too, Russia has a formidable force, with a grand total of over 4,000 aircraft. Its fleet is comprised of more than 800 fighter jets, hundreds of transport craft, over 1,600 helicopters, and more than 550 attack helicopters. The Polish Air Force is a fraction of the size, with less than 500 aircraft in total, including a few dozen fighter jets and just over 200 helicopters. If a war were to break out between Poland and Russia, it's likely that much of the fighting would take place on land and in the air, rather than at sea. However, Russian forces could also deploy Baltic Fleet vessels from ports in St. Petersburg and Kaliningrad to strike at Poland's northern coast. On the water too, Russia has the numbers to deal significant damage. It has one of the largest navies in the world, with over 400 vessels, plus over 60 submarines, more than 80 corvettes, dozens of patrol vessels, and various frigates and destroyers. Despite investing heavily in other areas of its military, Poland has never had a particularly large navy. It has around 60 vessels overall, but lacks any destroyers or major warships that could rival those under the Kremlin's control. So, if we look only at which side has the larger army and bigger amounts of tanks, jets, and so on, Russia is and always will be the obvious winner against Poland and most other countries on Earth. It's a vast nation with the finances and resources necessary to amass a truly colossal force, and even as its economy suffers and its losses continue to amount along the front lines of Kyiv, it remains a military superpower with a kind of firepower that many other countries can only dream of. But as Russia's conflict with Ukraine shows, war is not just a numbers game. It's not necessarily a case of whichever side has the bigger force will inevitably win, and history is littered with examples of smaller militaries overcoming the odds and scoring big wins against much larger opponents. And once we start to look beyond the numbers, examining each of these two military forces more closely, it's clear to see that it's a much more even fight than it may first appear. For starters, we can't underestimate the impact of the Ukraine war on the Russian army. If the Kremlin gave the order to invade Poland in 2026, that would come after 4 whole years of grinding attritional and costly warfare with Kyiv. During that time, Russia hasn't simply suffered major losses, it's also become a significantly weaker force in more ways than one. Many of its strongest soldiers, for example, were those who led the charge when Vladimir Putin ordered the initial invasion in 2022. Since that date, so many of those soldiers, men who often dedicated their whole lives to the military and were more than willing than most to lay their lives on the line for Mother Russia, have either been wounded or perished on the battlefield. Of course, the Kremlin has plenty more people to call up and send into the meat grinder, and it always has the option to mobilize hundreds of thousands, if not millions of additional soldiers, should the need arise. But there's no doubt that the standard of its recruits has slipped over time. These days, those signing up to fight in regions like Donetsk and Luhansk aren't hardened soldiers with decades of experience or highly trained and motivated men in peak physical fitness. More often than not, recruits added to Russia's ranks lack training and drive, since the professional young officer corps that once strengthened the army's ranks has gradually been gutted as the war raged on. Russia also lacks non-commissioned officers, leaving nothing but an array of weakened veterans, fresh-faced recruits, black male minorities, and even convicts, as well as people with chronic illnesses, all dispatched to the front lines to fend off against a better trained and more smartly organized opponent. That's the story in Ukraine, and it would also be a similar situation in Poland, where Russia's motley crew of poorly trained soldiers will come up against a smaller but more solid force, because Poland hasn't been playing around. In the years since Russia invaded Ukraine, Warsaw has taken the necessary steps to prepare itself for combat. Investing in depth, it's made smart, sensible moves to strengthen its forces, like the aforementioned plan to train countless more military-age men across the country, ensuring that there are so many more people who at least know how to handle a rifle and what to do if and when war breaks out. Poland also benefits from its 40,000-strong volunteer reserve, the Territorial Defense Force, as well as stay-behind forces across its many regions, with highly motivated and properly trained people ready to guard their land from an invading army. Several years of war with Ukraine have also taken their toll on Russia's vast stockpiles of military hardware, forcing the Kremlin's commanders to adopt increasingly desperate measures. Russian forces have been seen dragging rusty old tanks out of Soviet-era storage facilities, including T-62s, which were first produced back in 1961, and even older T-55s, which date back to the late 1940s. Of course, more modern Russian tanks do exist, like the T-90M, but due to economic hardships incurred during the war, combined with overwhelmed infrastructure, Russia lacks the facilities to produce these types of tanks in any significant numbers, and is currently trying to find ways to ramp up production regardless. So, even though it may have many more tanks to call on for an invasion of Poland, it's all a question of quality versus quantity. Russia certainly has the quantity, but as far as quality goes, its armor is distinctly lackluster. Any theoretical Kremlin charge on Warsaw would involve tanks that have fatal design flaws and were simply not designed with modern 21st century combat in mind. Many lack the state-of-the-art optics and battlefield management systems of today's top tanks, for example, putting them at a serious disadvantage against more advanced counterparts. As far as artillery goes, it's a similar situation. Russia has huge numbers of artillery systems, but will certainly struggle to make the most of them in Poland. The invasion of Ukraine has led to large-scale ammunition shortages, and many of Russia's best systems have either been damaged or destroyed in counter-battery duels or through Ukrainian precision drone strikes. So, while the Kremlin may once have been able to overwhelm almost any opponent with the sheer volume and scale of its artillery assaults, that simply is no longer the case. Meanwhile, on the Polish side, recent years have seen Warsaw take multiple measures to dramatically modernize its military and bolster its defensive and offensive capabilities. While other nations across Europe dawdled, Poland showed zero hesitation in upping its defense budget and making the changes it needed to make to get ready for a war with Russia. In 2022, it spent 2.7% of its GDP on defense. By 2024, that had risen to 4.2%. By 2025, it was even higher at 4.7%, placing Poland top of the list in terms of NATO nation defense spending in relation to GDP. And Poland's investments certainly aren't going to waste. The country's military leaders have kept a close eye on events in Ukraine and demonstrated exceptional intelligence and tactical planning in terms of how they allocate their funds. They've invested in a multitude of truly high-end assets that don't just enhance Poland's power projection, but should also make any future defense of the country much more viable and effective, even against a significantly larger force like Russia's. Some of its most impressive buys have been made in the tank department. Poland has purchased a large quantity of K2 Black Panther tanks from South Korea, for example, which are widely regarded as the most technologically advanced tanks of today, with the kind of internal electronics that put Russia's relics to shame. Warsaw has also invested in a total of 366 Abrams tanks from the US, 250 modern M1A2 SEP V3s, and 116 M1A1s, arguably among the toughest tanks in the world. Their all-round excellence makes them a near-flawless fit for almost any kind of combat situation imaginable. On top of that, it's also bought some of Germany's Leopard 2PL tanks too, which also rank highly in terms of firepower, mobility, and protection. In short, Poland has assembled an all-star tank team, picking and choosing some of the finest models from around the world, and by 2030, it hopes to field more than 950 main battle tanks in total, including 360 K2s, 366 Abrams, including 250 M1A2 SEP V3, and 116 M1A1 Abrams tanks, and 235 Leopard 2s. These units are backed up by similar state-of-the-art infantry fighting vehicles like Rosomax, along with self-propelled howitzers and South Korea-supplied K9 Thunder artillery systems, giving Poland more than enough firepower to go toe-to-toe with Russia's extensive armor. Thanks to that, any ground battles between the two forces would be intensely competitive, and Poland would have the unique benefits of more modern equipment coupled with home field advantage, which could lead to multiple major victories in border regions and elsewhere. In the air too, Poland's forces are much more capable and lethal today than they were only a handful of years ago. The country's Air Force fields F-16 fighter jets and has ordered a batch of F-35s as well, which will guard the country's skies alongside South Korean FA-50 light fighters. On the ground, an increasingly complex multi-layered air defense system has also been established, with core components including American Patriot batteries and CA-MM interceptor missile systems, reinforced with vast radar networks, providing all-important intelligence about target type, direction, speed, and location. So, even if Russia relied on similar tactics as it has in Ukraine, using vast drone swarms and massive missile salvos to strike at important locations across Poland's territory, Warsaw would be more than ready to counterattack those attacks, sending Russia's cheap Shahed drones and even its high-speed ballistic missiles spiraling out of the sky. Poland has also bolstered its border defenses like never before, thanks to the East Shield initiative, which launched in 2024. One of the most significant investments in border defense in Poland's entire history, East Shield will have cost around $2.55 billion once all the necessary work is complete. It involves a mixture of physical barriers like anti-tank ditches, bunkers and fortifications, as well as surveillance and electronic warfare systems like AI-powered data centers, anti-drone networks, and radar towers scanning the surrounding environment around the clock, delivering invaluable intelligence and instant alerts regarding any incoming threats or suspicious activities. All in all, Poland has done everything in its power to make any attempted invasion of its territory a logistical nightmare for its enemies. Here's a closer look at how exactly that nightmare might play out. First, Russia would likely rely on an opening salvo of missiles and drones fired towards key targets close to the Polish border. They'd inevitably attempt to break through the East Shield, aiming at important infrastructure targets like radar towers, command nodes, and air defense installations. In turn, Poland's flawlessly prepared defenses would activate. The country has been anticipating an attack like this for years, practicing and perfecting its response to a prospective Russian aerial assault. Its layered defenses, like CAMM interceptors and Patriot batteries, would wipe most if not all Russian assets out of the air, with F-16s and other fighter squadrons scrambled to take out any remaining stragglers. Down on the ground, Russia might also attempt similar incursion targets to those it used at the outset of the Ukraine war, rolling in large numbers of troops, tanks and armored vehicles, backed by artillery and bombing runs. Even in its existing unfinished state, the East Shield would prove more than a match for Russia's convoys, funneling enemy vehicles down predefined routes where Polish artillery would be waiting for them. Warsaw's Territorial Defense Force would also enter the fray, carrying out ambush and sabotage missions to catch the enemy unaware, while mechanized brigades, manning some of the world's strongest and most advanced tanks, would initiate counter-operations, striking at exposed Russian flanks and wiping isolated units off the map. Poland could also begin offensive operations of its own, as it would already undoubtedly have identified important Russian targets like ammo stockpiles and logistics hubs across Belarus and Kaliningrad. But Poland's biggest weapon isn't a tank, missile system or border defense. It's NATO. That's the game changer. That's the factor that would ensure that any Russian invasion of Poland would have zero chance of succeeding. Because unlike Ukraine, which is not a member of either the EU or NATO and has to rely on negotiation, bartering and so on to gain support from Western allies, Poland is part of both of those powerful alliances. As soon as any Russian force crosses the border or launches an attack on Polish soil, NATO's Article 5 triggers, and all other countries in the alliance will come to Warsaw's aid. That includes the world's strongest military force, the United States, along with numerous other major military players like France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. Even without their help, Poland would more than likely be able to hold its ground and dismantle Russia's invading force. But with the full backing of NATO's intelligence, manpower, logistics and weapon systems, it will be utterly unstoppable, leaving Russia with only two real options: either retreat or escalate the situation to unprecedented levels, like a nuclear missile attack, as the Kremlin boasts the world's biggest stockpile of nuclear warheads. But NATO too includes several of the world's other nuclear powers, and even Putin almost definitely wouldn't want to walk the path of mutually assured destruction. So when all is said and done, there's absolutely zero chance that a Russian invasion of Poland would prove successful for the Kremlin. Not only is Poland better armed and equipped than ever before, but it has the full, unrivaled support of the world's strongest alliance behind it. Now, you can learn much more about Poland's impressive East Shield initiative in this deep dive video breakdown, which looks at how much the project costs, when it will be complete, and what key components it includes. Or for a bigger and broader look at how Poland has brought its military into the modern age, check out this video, which lists Warsaw's various acquisition and exciting improvements in detail. And finally, make sure to subscribe to our channel too, so you can continue to be informed and enlightened about major military matters in Europe and around the world.